On this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk, Neal Karlen's upcoming book, biography or tell-all, reissue of The Rainbow Children coming soon, the Purple Spotlight on Jesse Johnson, and more. Amari Purple Talk starts now. Welcome to episode 23 of Amari Purple Talk, a Prince podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funk soloist, and I want to start by thanking everyone that has tuned in. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please leave your comments on the show where comments are displayed. Please continue to download and listen from your favorite podcast platform. And YouTube listeners, please continue to like and subscribe. Feel free to also visit my website, www.amaricommunications.com. You may also click the links in the show notes to follow me on social media and submit topics or questions for use in future episodes and purchase Amari merchandise. And before we begin our show today, we tape on Sunday nights, and this will be broadcast Monday. So by the time that you do hear all of this, everyone would have been well aware of Kobe Bryant, who died Sunday morning in a helicopter crash, along with his daughter Gianna and 7 other individuals. Authorities have not officially named the other individuals in that crash. However, some relatives have come forward, but like I said, probably by Monday morning, there should be additional information as it unfolds. I have been a huge Lakers fan, late 70s, the 80s Showtime era, definitely. The 3 championships during the Shaq and Kobe era were among my favorite highlights of watching the Lakers play. And, of course, with this current roster, they have also become something interesting to watch as well. So, so though I kind of grew up in the 70s and 80s, like I said, still a huge fan of basketball, still a fan of the Lakers. And yeah, this was pretty heavy for me to hear. I was completely shocked upon hearing the news and saddened as well. So before we begin our show, I want to take a moment of silence for Kobe, for Gianna, as well as the 7 other individuals, and of course the pilot of the copter as well. So let's take a moment of silence. And our thoughts and prayers to the entire Bryant family, as well as the families of the other individuals as well. And now we're going to begin our show today. And our first topic of today will be, will the Rainbow Children be the next Sony reissue? All right, so earlier this week, the Rocket Pool, I believe they're a record store based out of the UK. They do specialize in maintaining stock of Prince CDs, Prince vinyl, Prince-related artists as well, and as well as a lot of Prince and Prince-related merchandise. So the other day they leaked, well, maybe not necessarily leaked, but probably hinted at a possible release of the Rainbow Children. Now, the source that they obtained that information from, it's not a well-known source. It did not officially come from the estate. So as of this moment, we're all going to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But at least in the UK, there seems to be a pending vinyl release of the Rainbow Children. And then usually, I know Rocket Pool is a really great store. I see their post on social media a lot. And also looking forward to possibly purchasing something from that site at some point. But again, there's been no official word from the estate about the release of the Rainbow Children. But if you've heard my speculations on previous episodes regarding this year, we're now in 2020. And we had a really abundant year last year with the Sony reissues. Of course, definitely, Warner Brothers has been hitting home runs with the estate with the release of originals and the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition. But Sony, for now, has been really consistent on maintaining release of these reissues, especially since last year. Ultimate Rave, 3121, Musicology, Emancipation, Chaos Disorder, and those releases. So there's still quite a few releases that Sony has the license to, as far as material release from 1995 till 2015. So, like I said, previous episodes, I've speculated that maybe the next trio of releases would include the Rainbow Children. Now, given that particular period, there was the Rainbow Children, then you had the sort of One Night Alone, the single CD that was just basically the original, well, not counting the 1983 piano and the microphone demo that was released. But as far as a full official studio recording, the One Night Alone single CD is probably the original piano and microphone that we've gotten from Prince. So that could be a possibility if Sony decides to do the trio of releases like they have been doing the previous year. So you could, as a speculation, could be a release of the Rainbow Children, One Night Alone, and I'm not really sure what the third CD in that era. I don't know if maybe News would count as part of that trio. I mean, that's kind of closely linked. Or you could do a similar release with the One Night Alone Live, where you can sort of pair the Rainbow Children with the One Night Alone Live as sort of your big set, kind of similar to the Emancipation, Chaos Disorder, and Versace Experience release from last fall. Pair that with the One Night Alone studio CD of him performing mostly on the piano for those tracks. Or as I'm looking at my Tidal account, because I do have the albums listed in sort of chronological order. If you don't include the One Night Alone Alive set, you could do the Rainbow Children, One Night Alone, and Expectation. Now that would be a very eclectic set of releases, because really, Rainbow Children, it's a strong, cohesive album. It's one that I did enjoy. It was a little put off by a lot of the heavy-handedness of Jehovah's Witness references, but still there were a lot of songs that I thought were solid. lyrically strong. It was consistent from beginning to end. And it was also what I felt, and especially at that time, even more so now, what a 40-something-year-old Prince would or should sound like. Kind of that transition into elder statesman. And yeah, granted, we all default to the funk and then default to the heavy, rock guitar stuff and default to the deep love ballads. But, he was always conceptual, or there were albums where he was more conceptual than other albums. And this was definitely one of those where it was more conceptual. It was more more inspired. And I think that comes through the most. So that's what makes it something for me to look forward to if this is going to be one of the next series of releases, or heck, I'd be happy if it was just the single CD. I don't know. I'm not really sure how the Sony reissues have been selling compared to the Super Deluxe Edition and Originals. Now, granted, because of what those two releases are, yeah, they've been pretty solid, I believe, sales-wise, especially the 1999 Super Deluxe. I don't have any official numbers. I'll probably check into that another time. But again, compared to the Sony releases, not sure how they did, because I guess there was a series of releases, maybe not necessarily each quarter, but at least 3 out of the 4 quarters for 2019. So even if they decide to kind of scale back a little bit and just kind of release a single CD, one at a time, one at each quarter, there's no telling what's coming out of the Warner Brothers camp for this year. So it'll be interesting to see. So of course, as developments unfold, you'll definitely get my reactions and my expectations as to what's to come. But I'm definitely looking forward to the Rainbow Children. That's sort of one of my top 5 and anticipated reissues from Sony for this year. So, but what's most important is, what do you guys think? Is this something you're looking forward to? Do you have a favorite that you want to be reissued first, or instead of this one as the first release? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts on this topic. And so we're going to end this topic and move on to our next topic. And topic number 2 is Neal Karlen's upcoming Prince book. All right, so it has been announced that Neal Karlen is releasing a book on Prince. You can pre-order it on Amazon. It will be released on October 6th of this year. And the name of the book is titled, formerly known as, The For Real Life of Prince on and Off the Record. Okay, so for those that are unfamiliar with Neal Karlen, he is a journalist and a writer of nonfiction books. He currently lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was born and raised there, but his claim to fame for all Prince supporters, he was a reporter for Rolling Stone magazine. And it's kind of, if you can imagine a period for all the newbies out there or people that weren't around in the 80s, there were very few periodicals / magazines, folks, in which Prince gave an interview. And really, as you were getting into the sort of controversy 1999 Purple Rain period, he wasn't speaking to anyone at all. The sort of classic Rolling Stone cover with him and Vanity on the cover, There was no interviews. Everyone else was interviewed. I think there was some interviews with Vanity and some interviews with Morris Day, but none with Prince. But prior to that, there was an issue of Musician Magazine that gave a pretty good interview. But that's Musician Magazine, and that type of magazine is more so for the serious musician. So this wasn't, even though Rolling Stone is known for its in-depth and insightful and thoughtful articles and interviews, Musician Magazine was way different from, say, like a Right On magazine or a Black Beat magazine, or on the opposite rock end of the spectrum, Tiger Beat magazine, where it's just pretty much fluff pieces. So with Neal Karlen, in 1985, he was granted access to Prince and gave that very first classic Rolling Stone interview where it's, Prince speaks, Prince talks, and it's there was no official photo shoot for that cover, so they substituted a photo shoot with a sort of screenshot, as we call it now, a literal screenshot from the Raspberry Beret video. And this was, Prince, responding to questions, and a really great interview. You can go into sort of like the Rolling Stone archives online, or if you kind of Google search, Prince talks Rolling Stone, that interview will pop up, as well as Neal Karlen's interview from 1990, around the time of Graffiti Bridge and the New Tour. And both really, really great articles or interviews to read. But like I said, at that time in the 80s, those were, sort of like Halley's Comet, something once every few years, you would be granted this interview. And, of course, post 1996, even though if they weren't often, you got more sort of access to Prince, whether he was being open or cryptic, but you got more television time and more print interviews from 1996 all the way through 2016, 15 or 16, than, all of the 80s combined, so to speak. So there was a recent interview with Neal Karlen done by the Star Tribune, which around that time, and this is prior to Prince's passing, where he hinted at having, enough information for a book, but he wasn't going to put it out till, much later. And unfortunately, given the set of circumstances, sooner rather than later. But he did hint at the fact of having a sort of, a concept for a book, which I guess is this book that we'll be getting on October 6th. So, apparently, I guess what's going to be part of this book, there's no real synopsis for the book as of yet. There's not even a cover image. Like I said, if you go on Amazon, you can pre-order it. But like I said, there's no image and not a lot of information. But based on the Star Tribune interview, as well as an interview with Adweek magazine, let's see, I'll read a snippet from this, from the Adweek article. Let's see. So it says, it's well known that Karlen interviewed Prince several times for Rolling Stone. Less well known are the facts that he has written a rock opera with the versatile star and also worked with Prince on materials now sitting inside a Paisley Park time capsule. Okay. And there's a quote. I won't read the quote. But basically, he's commenting on the fact that he did sort of write a treatment for a rock opera with him. So, I don't know, my expectations or for this book, or what I'm hoping this book would be something closer to, I don't know, hoping the sort of, Rolling Stone interviews like the 1970 interview with John Lennon, with Jan Werner, kind of to that depth and magnitude where there was just a lot of information. There was a lot of Lennon just opening up. Kind of the first time you kind of got that. And was consistent with that all through different interviews up until his passing in 1980. So I'm hoping this is sort of that Lennon remembers kind of a vibe with this. And also to maybe, in some cosmic way, that it will fill in the blanks left by the beautiful ones as well. Because especially with that first Rolling Stone article, there's a lot that's off the record, which there were conversations between Prince and Neal Karlen, which kind of helped Neal sort of get Prince's confidence into, following through with this interview, because apparently it was, as all things with Prince, there's a chance that within a flash, the opportunity could have gone away. So, and apparently he was well liked and well respected enough, again, to do the second Rolling Stone interview. But apparently there's been, like with this rock opera, and probably with a lot of things, there's hints in the Star Tribune interview. There's hints with this Adweek interview. Like I said, working on a rock opera, working on a time capsule. What could possibly be in that time capsule? You could fill a time capsule with many things, representing, either communicating your, something that you probably wouldn't reveal in your lifetime, or you could just fill it with just a lot of memorabilia from a certain era, to give, future generations that sort of hands-on feel as to what that era was like, that previous era was like. So, like I said, that's my expectation of it. Like I said, and I hope it's kind of like we won't get like maybe the deftness of if A Beautiful Ones had been fully completed, or if there were more than just 50 pages of Prince's own handwriting involved. But I think hopefully this could fill in some of those blanks, or it could be like a continuation of it. And like I said, hope in comparisons to the whole Lennon Remembers thing, this is one book I would like to see. And also, too, a shout out to Miles Marshall Lewis, who has done a lot of articles on the Minneapolis scene and has a website called the Paisley Diaries, where he's conducted a lot of interviews with a lot of the Paisley Park artists. In fact, piggybacking off of our Purple Spotlight from last week on Jill Jones, check out his part 1 and part 2 with the article and interview with her as well. So what I'm hoping for, if you get with Neal Karlen the sort of 1970 Lennon Remembers, I'm hoping that Miles Marshall Lewis has enough material, because there was that Ebony article that there was a real deep version of it that appeared online, and Prince had him take it down. A more edited portion did end up in Ebony magazine. So I'm hoping that there's a lot more to that, and that would be sort of the, Lennon Playboy interview, Lennon BBC interview, that it was his last. And, maybe we'll get that. And, like I said, we'll never get the whole story at this page, but I would think between the beautiful ones, the Neal Karlen book, like I said, just a hint, just an idea, Miles. If you ever decide you want to put out that book, then that would be a nice sort of 3-volume set, because it's going to be mostly his own words, and with a lot of stuff being off the record, hopefully a bit more, I can't think of the journalistic term for it at the moment, but I guess a lot more revealing or a lot more openness to it. So who knows? But like I said, I'm excited for the Neal Karlen book to be released. So what do you guys think about it? Is this a book that you're anxious for? Are you familiar with Neal Karlen's work with Prince? And would this be a book that you would like to see? Leave me a comment below and leave your thoughts. And then we're going to end topic number 2 and move on to topic 3. And topic 3 is it too soon for a piano and microphone release? Okay, so like I said, with Sony at this point just concentrating on doing just reissues of albums that have been out of print, and these are things that the estate owns the masters to and Sony has the license for, because of Prince's contract with Warner Brothers that gave him ownership of the Warner Brothers classic material. The estate owns that, but based on the contract they signed with Prince in 2014, they have license to that classic material up until 2021. So, of course, again, Warner Brothers, to me, kind of like a little slow start. The Purple Rain Deluxe set, which it was nice having the bonus material, but it left a lot of supporters flat. Because it wasn't a comprehensive release, say on the scale of a 1999 Super Deluxe Edition, which they knocked that one out of the park. And Originals being a very first step in the right direction, handling a lot of this unreleased material, or legacy material, I should say. And again, Sony having control of the recordings from 1995 all the way up until about 2015. Again, they're focusing on basically just getting stuff out there that's been out of print for a while and into a lot of our hands where, we're filling gaps in our collection. We're replacing items that may have been lost or whatever, not there anymore for whatever reason. But they haven't, as of yet, put out a collection of either material that we haven't heard before or a lot of material, because there's just as many unreleased albums, just as much as the classic period. Now, maybe some of those projects we're not as familiar with as, say, Dream Factory or Camille or the Black Album, those things that, we're all aware of because of the Warner's period. But let's see, I don't know. I think one that comes to mind is sort of the High album, which was supposed to have been released, but it was replaced with the Rainbow Children. So there's, I'm sure, plenty of albums like that, or different configurations of albums, sort of his post Warner Brothers period that, we're not aware of. Or, there's different track listings for Emancipation. There's different track listings for the Gold Experience. So from Sony's end, we have not had access to officially released material, say, from those periods. And I guess the question would beg, would it be beneficial for Sony to release something that we are not familiar with, or a compilation of tracks that we haven't heard before, or tracks that are in the vault that we're familiar with that we would like to see officially released for that sort of 20-year period? And probably the one that's been in demand the most are the piano and microphone concerts. This past week marked the 4th anniversary of the inaugural concerts at Paisley Park. After that, I think some of the strong shows, definitely Australia, and also the final shows in Atlanta. And there's been a lot of demand for a while for either one of those or all of those as a box set. Now, again, there has been demand for it, but it begs the question, after almost 4 years, is it still too soon? Would coming out with an official release of, say, that concert, even though it's in demand, is it something we're ready for? Or maybe as supporters, we're ready for it, but is it too soon for the estate to look at it, to revisit it, or to go over it with Michael Howell and try to put together a comprehensive set? Is it something that it's just still too final? Even though I had this topic planned pretty much since the middle of the week, closer to the weekend, stumbled across an article stating that there is going to be a documentary on John Lennon's final year of life. Now, of course, this is apples and oranges, because we're talking 4 years for Prince versus 40 years for John Lennon. But, as much of a fan as I am of John Lennon, it's like, as a fan, I would like a double fantasy box set. Because, if you really look at the history of that recording, beyond the fact that it's his absolute last one, but the recording sessions and the producer, Jack Douglas, recorded a lot of in-between session stuff. So there's like, full conversations. And I'm not sure what they all consist of, but he felt that this was such a historic moment that he felt he should document as much as he could on audio tape. I'm not sure how much videotape exists of those sessions, but anyway, I'm kind of digressing just to make the point that as much as I would be looking forward to this documentary, as much as I would be looking forward to a double fantasy box set, even after 40 years, it kind of has a certain heavy finality to it, where if we just kind of keep it at arm's length, then it's not so heavy. It's like we're aware of it, we've internalized it, and we've figured out how to keep things moving forward. But just that heavy reminder, is it something that we're ready for, really, with that? And I guess that begs the question with this. Could you put out a single CD? Because it would be hard to pick then which performance. And, a lot of live albums really consist of a combination of different dates. So like a certain suite of songs, okay, the best performances of those songs were from this date. And then the next suite of songs, the best recordings or the best performance was from another city and another date, but they compile it. But as far as you getting the full listening experience, it's you experiencing a concert in its entirety from the comfort of your own home. So you're not necessarily thinking of, oh yeah, that was the show from, New York. Oh, well, that was the show from Hawaii, or something like that. So, and as far as us being supporters, I don't think we would necessarily be satisfied with that because we're so used to the experience of the entire show. Us as Prince supporters, it's pretty much the same level as people that are into, say, Bruce Springsteen or people that are into the Grateful Dead, where, or Frank Zappa, their bootlegged concerts. It's that, single city and that full performance beginning to end, warts and all. And that's what makes it special. Even a lot of the imperfections, with it. So I don't think we would be satisfied with a single CD of, well, here's, 10 minutes from, Paisley Park this day in January. And then, somewhere towards the end of it is another night from January. And then in the middle, there's Atlanta. And then at the end, there's Australia. I don't think we would be satisfied with that type of a compilation. I do feel it would be a question of picking from that bunch for a single CD. So say take an Atlanta show or the last Atlanta show and putting that out just as the single CD. That would be really heavy and a hard decision to make as to whether to just put that out, or do you put out the entire box set of the most important Paisley Park dates, the most important Australia dates, and then cap it off with the final Atlanta ones. And again, there's that sort of, and maybe it's not so much as a thing of, is it too soon, but trying to plan it out well enough so that it economically makes sense, that it's something that's definitely going to satisfy the demand for the public, and to, put together the packaging. Because again, there's, it's putting something in a historical context. And like I always maintain every episode, I'm a liner note junkie. So to, compile that with a book, that would have everything in its, giving those dates a historical perspective, that takes planning, and it is definitely something that you shouldn't, rush through. And let's see, now the deal with the estate made with Sony, that was from 2018. So yeah, I can kind of see where if they did lay out a solid plan, then maybe it makes sense to get all of these reissues out the way, and then that way they can turn their attention to box sets, special releases, compilations, and also to the fact that they are going to get their hands on the classic Warner Brothers material in 2021. And it would be interesting to see what happens with all of that. The box sets, legacy reissues. Do you get a even more comprehensive, say, 1999 deluxe? Like I said, I think with Purple Rain, because that will stay with Warner Brothers, then you'll probably get a better box set down the line. I know it was hinted at by Michael Howell in a recent magazine article discussing the 1999 deluxe. But again, Sony has a really great track record. They, God, they have just about all the legends. There's Miles Davis. Again, there's Jimi Hendrix, which they've had a licensing deal with his estate since 2009. There's, I think, still Bruce Springsteen. There's Bob Dylan. Sly and the Family Stone. Now, I think my personal thing is that I am happy with the reissues that they've had. There is a box set. I don't have it because I just have the single CDs, and that has some good bonus material on it as well. But I'm satisfied with it, but it could be a lot better. And two, the big elephant in the room is Michael Jackson has been largely absent from any serious legacy treatment. So, I mean, there was that Escape album, which is a really good album, but it's just creepy because it sounds like he recorded it yesterday, because they brought in all these current producers. They brought in the Timbalands, and they brought in the Rodney Jerkins, and they just took stuff from the vault and put today's spin on it in the remix, and it sounds like he recorded it yesterday. And that's kind of creepy. And if you remember, right around the time that was coming out, the performance from, I think it was the Billboard Awards, and they used the hologram, that was really, really creepy. So, I feel, but then again, Michael Jackson did burn his bridge with Sony, and I think this is sad to say. I think it's just basically corporate revenge, because they basically, in my opinion, they got the ATV / Sony, Michael's half. They managed to buy off the family for $750 million. They did allow the estate to maintain 100% control over Michael's own publishing. But the question still remains of who controls the master recordings. That should be another topic for another day. In fact, saving that for the Amari Funk Soloist Hour. I'll do that as a future episode on that once I get that show off the ground. But long story short, like I said, Michael Jackson's been the only one out of Sony that's been out of the pool, while everybody else, Prince, included, has been getting really great care and timing on, whether it's posthumous releases or in the case of Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, Sly Stone, like I said, their catalogs are treated with some pretty good respect. And even Sly Stone stuff, even though, like I said, it could be better, it's still better than what, the Michael Jackson fans have been getting. And that right there in itself isn't a fair thing. So, but like I said, piano and a microphone, again, yeah, it's something that I would like to see. But like I said, I would like to have it get the treatment and respect that it deserves. And even if that takes several years, and I mean, not maybe 10 or 20 years, mind you, but I would say we would probably get something not in 2021 or 22, maybe not even 2023, but I would say definitely somewhere within the next 5 to 6 or 7 years, maybe getting a box set that would cover that, and I'm going to go out on a limb and speculate that it's going to be a box set and not just a single CD, because again, the show itself was evolving, the anecdotes between songs were evolving, and I think it would just give you as complete of a picture or complete story that would be an excellent companion to those of us that already have the book, The Beautiful Ones, because I do believe that had he finished that book, the book and that tour, and he did say that there was going to be a CD, or he had a CD, I think pretty much mastered from one of the shows that was going to hopefully come out at a future date with Prince again. You never knew. But there is something that is mastered and ready to go in the vault. But for me, I'm going to speculate that it is going to be a full box set. And I think we will get that within the next 5 to 7 years. And that's my guess. But what's most important is, what do you guys think? Are you one of the ones that are heavily in demand of a piano to microphone CD release? Do you want a single CD? Do you want the one that Prince said that was finished and ready to go? Would you like a box set? Leave me your thoughts in the comments. And that's going to end our topics for today, and then we're going to move on to our Purple Spotlight. And our Purple Spotlight is a segment that highlights a Prince album, film, video, or an associated artist. And today's Purple Spotlight is Jesse Johnson. And Jesse Johnson was born in Rock Island, Illinois, June 1st of 1960, and moved to East St. Louis, Illinois. He was around 9 years old at that time. There is, if any of you guys listen to Questlove's podcast, Questlove Supreme, if you can go in the archives, if it's still available, go into the archives and definitely check out that interview with Jesse Johnson. In fact, every opportunity that Jesse Johnson's interviewed, I'm there listening. To me, out of all the associated artists, he's definitely in sort of like my top 5 favorites. Not only just because of, the heavy guitar playing, but his songs and his production style. It's something that even myself have tried to copy over the years. Can't get it as good as he can, but definitely he's an inspiration to me musically. Definitely one of the big ones. I remember just kind of, I think between the first time album and the second time album, so that first time tour, and I can't remember the magazine. I can't remember if it was Black Beat or was it Rock and Soul? I can't remember which one, but there was an article giving a review of the Times performance, and I forget what city they were in. But the writer at that time had the I guess, I don't know, intuition to single out Jesse Johnson as somebody that at some point should go solo or do more singing within the time, kind of get a solo spot within the time. And, of course, then this is like, this is their first album, and, I was hooked first album. By the time, definitely the second album, that's my favorite band of my generation. That solidified it right there. But so within that sort of 81, 82, early 83 period, that was something you couldn't think of immediately. It was like, oh, okay, but yeah, I like the time as it is. This is a funky band, so no, nobody goes solo just yet, But as 84, 85 unfolded, it's like, well, my favorite band is now No More. We know Morris is going solo, but it was refreshing to see Jesse go solo. Now, besides Jungle Love and The Bird, Probably the first things we heard from him were the 2 tracks he did on Janet Jackson's album. The one with Dream Street. Yeah, that's the name of it. It had the hit that Marlon wrote, Don't Stand Another Chance. That did pretty good. But there were 2 tracks that Jesse Johnson produced on that album. And I mean, they were pretty good. I mean, I thought they were pretty good, funky tracks. I mean, of course, they weren't Jungle Love and the Bird, mind you, but, again, this is before we got word of him going solo. So, fast forward a few months later and going into sort of 1985, then the first Jesse Johnson album pops up, and that was funky because, we're all coming off of the big high of Purple Rain, all of 1984. We were just drenched literally in Purple Rain practically. So then you were getting, well, no, actually Around the World in a Day hadn't been released yet. But, for those of us that were reading Rolling Stone and reading about the sort of listening party for it, or, the showcase for the record executives, he was turning in the master tapes, and the articles, talking about the whole Beatle influence with it, there was sort of this absence of funky Prince, because there was going to be no more time. The Family album hadn't come out yet. So that first Jesse Johnson album sort of filled that void for, the funkier side of things in the Minneapolis sound. Now, granted, you had Jam and Lewis doing their own thing, but they were outside of the circle at that point. And here's Jesse now outside of the circle. And it was sort of where, Jam and Lewis kind of had more of that polished funk, but they still put the chili sauce on it. With Jesse, it was more homegrown, literally, because he bought the mixing board from Prince that Prince used in his home to record a lot of the Time albums and the 1999 album and the Vanity 6 album. So you still kind of had that sort of home studio vibe with that first Jesse Johnson album. And, we bought into it, definitely. It was a good, strong first album. My only takeaway was that there just wasn't enough, to me, it wasn't enough lead guitar in it. Of course, it had the rhythm chops, and I love rhythm guitar. So, that's all I would love to do on a record anyway, is just do the chicka-chicka-chicka-chicka, just do that. But, with Jesse Johnson as amazing of a guitar player, cutting from the cloth of Hendrix, Eddie Hazel, and then the 3 Kings, B.B. King, Albert King, and, oh shoot, who's the other one? Blues enthusiasts, don't hate me. Albert King, B.B. King. Oh, shoot. But anyway, definitely, heavy blues influence. And I think even more so than Prince. Prince could play some blues, but, Jesse was deeper. And that's that same sort of heaviness, like I said, to where he can be in the same breath of an Eddie Hazel and Jimi Hendrix. And I think that is the distinct edge that Jesse, to me, always had over Prince as far as lead guitar. Where, Prince, even though, like I said, he could adapt to a lot of that, but also, too, we also know that Santana was sort of the slightly heavier influence when it came to lead guitar on that. So, again, where Jesse plays heavy, Prince, to me, played, in his own words, talking about Santana played prettier. And Prince definitely would put a lot of those Santana colors even into a lot of his heaviest guitar work as well. So, but, like I said, Jesse had that edge. And I kind of like that sort of raw edge. You know, I do like the homegrown, do it yourself kind of vibe or feel on records. You know, the Westbound era, you know, wasn't quite as polished as, say, Parliament stuff, but, you know, I kind of lean more towards that sort of rawness and depth, you know, that as opposed to the polish a lot of stuff. You know, at least I always think in those terms too, just kind of doing my own stuff. But definitely, like I said, Jesse is a huge, huge influence. So you had, yep, Jesse Johnson's Review, which came out in 1985. As far as the pop charts versus the R&B charts, of course, you know, Jesse placed a lot higher on the R&B charts than on the pop charts. But again, you know, coming out of that Minneapolis scene, you're dealing with major record labels, then there's always that pressure, you know, to be like Prince. And, you know, definitely a song like when Jesse started coming out with his own B-sides too, you know, they were just as interesting. And sometimes, I'm not even going to go there with that, but they were just as interesting as a lot of Prince's B-sides too. You know, or sometimes there are tracks where it's like, man, that should have been on the album too. Like, why was this just the B-side? But definitely, yeah, Free World, yeah, it did have that heavy guitar at the end, sort of that kind of like Jungle Love, where it just comes, the heavy guitar comes in later in the songs. Yeah, but the first Jesse Johnson album, Jesse Johnson's Review, that yielded 4 singles. 3 of those were in the top 10 on the U.S. R&B charts. Be Your Man, which was number 4. Can You Help Me was number 3. I Want My Girl was number 7. Let's Have Some Fun. It probably came out much later after the album's momentum was, I guess, kind of dying down. But Let's Have Some Fun is like actually one of my favorite tracks from that album, in addition to the hits. As well as She Won't Let Go. To me, She Won't Let Go is sort of that lost time song. Like that should have been on a, if the time was still together, that would have been like a deep cut track that Jesse would have submitted, I guess. But it's one of my favorites though. But really, my hands down favorite from this era is the Shockadelica album, which yielded the duet with Sly Stone, Crazy. My other favorite tracks on there, some of those were released as singles. She I Can't Resist, Baby Let's Kiss. Now I like the 12-inch version of that better than the album version on it. Black in America, you know, it's that period. You know, it's weird because everyone was in the midst of this sort of crossover, and especially like a lot of heavy funk bands that were very heavy, knee deep in funk, with the exception of Parliament Funkadelic. They stayed pretty much consistent. They never watered down their sound, or they never went disco. They never tried to cross over and appeal. You know, like Atomic Dog crossed over and appealed on its own merit, kind of the same way a James Brown record would. You know, it's just funky. He's not trying to there's James Brown polish, but it was definitely different, way different than Motown polish. So to me, like something like Atomic Dog was kind of in that vein. You know, there's P-Funk polish, and then there was this sort of Lionel Richie polish that was happening in the 80s. And, you know, then there was things, you know, cats, you know, me included, you know, wearing Jerry curls and the whole bit. And, you know, I mean, we were very, you know, I know me personally was very well aware of who I am. But it seemed like within that sort of Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie crossover area, there was sort of this gloss or this sort of perception that was very different than the world that I would be in when I walked out my door, because there was still a lot of, definitely still a lot of racism going on. There was just a lot that challenged you, even though I think that inspiration from the 60s and the 70s carried over to some of us in the 80s, that sadly kind of got washed away with the whole crack epidemic. But the point being, where there was this song, Black in America, that really brought it all back home, that kind of put the 80s back in to a certain perspective. Because right around the same time, let's see, let me think. Yeah, I think on the Raising Hell album, I have to double check, but I think they have a track on that album. If it's not that album, it was the one right after that, kind of within a year or two of each other anyway. But I think it was almost simultaneously that Run DMC had the track Proud to Be Black too. So this is very pre-Public Enemy that we're talking about here. So, pre-KRS-One. Even though they were probably just starting, but, anybody outside of New York hadn't quite caught on yet or hadn't heard yet. So like I said, to kind of have those two tracks, they were very pleasant tracks for me to hear at that time. Because like I said, there was, for me, a lot of disappointment with a lot of funk bands, like I said, trying to appeal. And again, the pressures of the record company, the corporations were starting to creep in and take over and kind of further segregated the music at that time. Even though the ironic thing was that a lot of this music was bringing people together as well. Because, but the thing is that I think when hip hop finally planted its flag into the sand and said, hey, we're a music that's here to stay. And again, going back to, there's James Brown polish, there's P-Funk polish, and then there's sort of Motown polish, there's sort of crossover polish. And hip hop at that time was very unapologetic and was like, no, we are going to make it on our own merits. We're not going to change our sound for anything or anyone. New kids out there, take note, take listen. You probably think you're being apologetic or unapologetic, but you have the mercy of these record companies. And we need more Black in America. We need more, Proud to Be Black. We need more Say It Loud. We need more funk. We need more On the One. We need more ownership. And we need more freedom as well. So, like I said, to have that song, and basically, here's a cat, he's wearing pink, he's got this big Jerry curl, but he plays some hellified rock guitar, and he's got a song called Black in America. So, and you got to listen to the lyrics of that, because like I said, it really puts things in a certain perspective. And we still need music that makes us think as well as move our feet too. It can move the crowd and move you spiritually too at the same time. So definitely, again, Shockadelica is my favorite album from that era. Every Shade of Love was his last A&M Records release in the 80s. Love Struck, I think, from that era, I guess it would be my overall favorite Jesse Johnson song. I did enjoy that album a lot. Besides Free World, the rest of the album didn't quite perform as well as the other two, the previous two. But by then, Jesse Johnson also contributed songs to various soundtracks as we kind of move out of the 80s. I know during the 80s, he had songs that were on the 16 Candles soundtrack, a song that was on Breakfast Club soundtrack. But by the 90s, he had a song placed on the White Men Can't Jump. He does a lot of the guitar work on the film A Time to Kill with Samuel L. Jackson starring in that. And probably the most popular of his soundtrack work is the track Nights Like This, I Wish Raindrops Would Fall, which was used in the movie The Five Heartbeats. So, nights like this, I wish raindrops would fall. Dang. Yeah, one of my favorite movies too, actually. So basically he's making money doing soundtrack work. But as we kind of move into the 90s, there was an album that's out of print that I wish he would re-release, and that album is Bare My Naked Soul, because that is the unapologetic, unadulterated rock, heavy rock guitar of Jesse Johnson. Like I said, it's a CD I no longer have, and like I said, I wish he would reissue that record on CD, on vinyl, on digital, or whatever technology that has yet to be invented. That album needs to be a part of it. If some of you have it, you guys are very lucky. I used to have it, and again, would love to have that definitely re-released. And that was around 1996 when Bare My Naked Soul was released. And he sort of kind of dropped off the radar musically, or at least recording wise, for about 15 years or so. And then in 2009, in October, he released the Verbal Penetration album. Now, 2009 was a very, as far as the Minneapolis sound to me, or Prince and Prince related, I've had a sort of a love-hate relationship with a lot of Prince releases, between Musicology and Lotus Flower. Like, I love Musicology. I love some of 3121. I'm not a fan of Planet Earth. So by the time we get to Lotus Flower, I like the Lotus Flower album. I'm slightly disappointed by the Minneapolis Sound album, because I know that was a big triple set if you count the Bria Valente. And the Bria Valente, I've listened to it a few times. I'm only disappointed because he said it was going to be like Sade, and it doesn't sound like Sade to me. So, but I need to kind of go back. There's people that say it's not too bad to listen to, and I'll probably revisit it at some point. But like I said, I did love the Lotus Flower album. Like I said, I love some of the Minneapolis Sound album. So for me, that was sort of a kind of once, let's see, when I bought that in March of 2009. So pretty much by the summer, I was kind of almost done with that particular album. But at the same time, you had the family that was in the midst of planning their reunion album, even though they had to change their name and call themselves F Deluxe. But they had been leaking tracks from the album while they were recording it. And a lot of that was, that had a great sound to it, and it was building the excitement for their reunion album. The Time, the original Seven, had reformed the previous year, had done a lot of shows in Vegas, and they were planning a reunion album. So that was going to be exciting to hear, even though that didn't come out till 2011. But meanwhile, Jesse drops this Verbal Penetration, which is a 2 CD release. I still have my CD. I wore the grooves off of the first CD. Basically, had to rebuy it on iTunes. And if you can't find it used somewhere, iTunes is the only place you can get this album now. So, like I said, if you can't find it used someplace, by all means, if you do have iTunes and you don't have this, by all means, get this. Because next to Bare My Naked Soul, this is my absolute other favorite Jesse Johnson album. So if I were to rank them, I would say Verbal Penetration would be number 1, Bare My Naked Soul would be number 2, Shockadelica would be number 3, and probably at number 4 would be, I'm not sure if you could still find this anywhere. Again, if you could find it used or if it's still in print. Excuse. But get the Ultimate Collection, the Jesse Johnson Ultimate Collection, because it has the hits and it has most of the B-sides as well. It does have the extended version of Baby Let's Kiss on it. So that's great to have, along with Free World. There's one unreleased track called Vibe. It's almost like a little D'Angelo flavor, which some of that D'Angelo flavors on some of the tracks on Verbal Penetration, and D'Angelo may actually be an uncredited contributor to that album as well. And he also did phenomenal backing tracks for the Times Reunion album, that Original 7 Condensate. That's another CD that seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. Like I said, I don't even think you can get it digitally anywhere. Again, if you can find it used somewhere, check it out. Now, there was a lot of drama with the recording and the release and the lack of touring in support of that. A lot of things which Jesse Johnson voiced his concerns a lot on Facebook post leaving the time at that point. Also, too, if you listen to Morris Day's comments, there were so many egos that sort of, you can kind of almost tell now when you go back and listen to it. I think I struggled with that one because the concept of the time could not be followed through. I think they did have songs ready that were basically, the time concept, where basically what you got, maybe even more updated. You kind of lost that in the translation because I guess one of them or a couple of them, maybe Jesse included, felt that, well, we're no longer shackled by the name and the concept of the time. So let's do something completely different. So there is a lot of funk on that album. To me, it's just not the time funk, but it's, 7 great musicians and producers, doing great tracks and great, pretty good songs. But that thing that made the time, because, Prince wouldn't let them, that was missing. That was sort of absent in that. So, but still, like I said, Jesse's released a lot of the instrumental tracks from that on his Facebook pages and Instagram pages as well. So go back and check those out. Definitely give those a listen. But yeah, those, to me, his tracks were definitely amongst the consistently strongest tracks on that project. I mean, Jam and Lewis did some good work on a lot of the tracks. Actually, Trending is still my favorite song from that project, because to me that was the closest feel to the time. It sounded like the time, but in 2011, because it had the feel, it had the humor, even the title, they were able to capitalize off of, the modern age. So they were able to adapt the time concept to that, where, a lot of the tracks to me really didn't hold true to that concept though. But like I said, still funky tracks. Songs, like I said, I love Trending, Strawberry Lake. That, to me, that was sort of like Ice Cream Castles Part 2 or Ice Cream Castles 2.0 to me. Let's see, Oh You Don't Know Me Now. That's probably my other favorite one, but that's a Jesse instrumental track, or a Jesse co-produced track on that. Let's see, what else do I like on that? One Time, that one's a good one. To me, felt like the time, and guitar's really heavy and it just bounces. But yeah, like I said, definitely check those things out. But again, definitely seek out Verbal Penetration. Like I said, some of the tracks of Bare My Neck and So, they are on YouTube to listen to. Like I said, hopefully he'll re-release that one day, so I hope that does happen. But that's in a nutshell. That's Jesse playing those sexy solos right here. So that's our Purple Spotlight for today. And we're going to move on to our Bite the Boots segment. And basically, Bite the Boots is a segment that highlights a circulating bootleg or vault recording or video for consideration for an official release by the estate. And today's Bite the Boot selection is the Le New Morning from June 15th of 1987, recorded in Paris. All right, so what I wanted to do this week, it was a previous episode of Amari Purple Talk where I put forth the question of, should the estate create a separate label for like heavy bootleg recordings? So, there are sort of classic, concerts in an artist's career that deserve an official release, where it's packaged and marketed just as it would be an artist, say like Legacy Recording, or marketed as if it was a brand new project, period, or it could be a current concert or something that could be marketed that way. But one of the examples I put forth was the Hendrix Estate. Now, they are officially Experience Hendrix LLC, and that is the label that produces all the official Jimi Hendrix material, which is now currently licensed through Sony for distribution and getting those into the stores and into our hands as the public. Now, they also have a subsidiary label called Dagger Records. So if you go to the Jimi Hendrix website, of course, you see all the official Jimi Hendrix stuff under the Experience Hendrix label. But there's also their Dagger Records imprint. And basically, that label facilitates the really deep cut bootleg material, or I should say vault material, because they own it. But a lot of it, I guess they make deals like if, say, someone made a home recording of a certain concert or something, and that's the only thing that's in existence. Like, though Hendrix recorded just about everything, there's one or two little items that I guess sort of slipped through the cracks, and only a lucky fan or two managed to capture that performance on a certain day. And I don't know if they made deals for that or how they acquired that, or maybe all Jimmy had that day was a cassette tape to work with. But these are items, whether they're demos, most of them are like live recordings, rehearsals, that basically there's not a market for in the mainstream. Like, you couldn't really package it and, make it attractive to the mainstream consumer. So what I wanted to do with this week's Bite the Boot selection is try to find something that would sort of fit that, you probably really couldn't pass this off as, say, like maybe in originals, or you couldn't quite pass it off as, I don't know, maybe something off of the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition. Now, maybe, just maybe, you could include this in a massive Sign of the Times box set, but just for the sake of this segment, we'll pretend that the estate came up with a subsidiary label, or they decided to, say, resurrect the NPG Music Club, and you could download this particular project and download the artwork and go from there, or maybe make this sort of like a record store day release, a limited edition or something. But again, like I said, we'll pretend that they came up with a subsidiary label. We'll call it Purple Music or something. And this Late New Morning from Paris. So basically what it is, it's an after show that was recorded on June 15th of 1987. Now, like I said, what would make this unique for a situation like a sort of subsidiary label or an NPG Music Club release or Record Store Day release? The track listing, because it is an after show. You have Purple House, which is basically Prince's rendition of Jimi Hendrix's Red House. And he does a phenomenal cover. As a side note, I've seen Jesse Johnson perform Red House twice in 1988. So as far as someone covering Red House, I'm going to give that award to Jesse Johnson. However, honorable mention will be made to the Raven to the Joy Fantastic rendition of it. And there's a rendition of it on a Jimi Hendrix tribute album. So again, Purple House. I've got my mind made up. It's a classic 70s funk song. I got my mind made up. Come on, you can get it, girl. Yeah, that was one of my favorite jams from back then. And then, like I said, just jamming on different songs. There's a cover of Just My Imagination, which he was doing a lot of during the Sign of the Times Love Sexy tours at a lot of the after shows. There's also Mutiny. There's also James Brown's Sex Machine that was performed at this performance. This one I have not heard. I've heard the Small Club. I've heard that after show. There's a couple of other after shows that I've heard from that period. But I don't have this one. So like I said, I was kind of doing my research. I kind of singled this one out because of the unique track listing for it. Because it doesn't lean heavy on, Prince songs, or maybe even sort of the deep dive Prince songs that you would normally get at after shows. It's just them just kind of working it out and jamming and being funky and, making it swing for a couple of hours more. So this is definitely one that I would like to see the estate try to tackle. Like I said, whether it's a subsidiary thing they can set up for these type of projects, or again, try to find a way to resurrect the NPG Music Club. Like I said, I've always brought up Frank Zappa as another inspiration as well. His estate, or even during his lifetime, he was very good at combating the bootleggers, even to the point of basically whatever the bootlegger had out, copying the track listing, copying even the artwork, and putting out an official, better quality released version of that same bootleg. And that would, in fact, the name of the segment is taken from inspiration from Frank Zappa's Beat the Boots, which when you go to his website, it has all of those, whether they're CD, vinyl, kind of in later years after his passing, there were like digital only releases as well. So like I said, it would be nice if the estate could, like I said, if they don't do a subsidiary label for these type of projects, special projects, then resurrect the NPG Music Club and maybe just reserve that for these type of deep cut things, for, items that say may not be as commercially viable, or maybe from an economic standpoint, maybe trying to get it into your Target and Walmart, or popped up on Amazon somewhere. We could just go to the brand new NPG Music Club and download these, or maybe special order, just you can only get a packaged CD from the estate, special release just from the estate only. So this is definitely something that I picked, and hopefully as we keep doing these, I'll try to find more sort of obscure stuff. I know we've covered a lot of the obvious stuff like Camille, Dream Factory, even some of the more obvious concerts that definitely should see an official mainstream release, like the 1984 birthday show, the 1983 benefit show, which debuted Purple Rain and Baby I'm a Star and I Would Die for You, that debuted those tracks. So like I said, as we kind of go on, I'll try to find some more obscure stuff, or research more obscure stuff, and listen to more stuff that I think would be a good fit for something like that. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this the Late New Morning? I know this is something that is popular amongst a lot of the collectors out there. Is this something that you would like to see as a mainstream release? Do you think it would work as a mainstream release? Or do you think, hey, it should be like a special record store day release? Or do you think the estate should resurrect the NPG Music Club, or sell the CD directly from their own website? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And that is going to end this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk. And as always, thank you to everyone that has tuned in. Continue to like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, and also hit that notification bell as well. Also, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, continue to download and continue to listen. This has been a very heavy day. Just because of the loss, that's a father and daughter that was, that's lost to this earth, that's lost to their family. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's take care of each other. Let's experience each other while we're here. And as always, keep it purple and on the one.